All right, welcome back. I'm here with Victor Akosile. Vic, how you doing, sir?
I'm good, Adam. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I really appreciate you coming back, and I really, particularly given that you live and work and are native to DC, yeah, I'm very interested in your perspectives, and I'm sure our audience is as well. So, before we get into what's happening in DC and how that's affecting the lens by which you're viewing your work life,
Mhm.
if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to professionally as well.
Sure, sure. Of course, here, Al. Yes. So, for those like you don't know, I'm Vic Akosile. I'm a senior HR manager here in our nation's capital. Here, I work in the defense and the intel industry, as most folks who work like around this area do. A lot of my work really centers around HR technology, analytics, really how can we use those things to help transform our workforce for positive changes, right? So that's a lot of what like I do. I've been doing it for quite like some time. Prior to I was in management consulting, but I think this area here of really trying to focus on the positive change through like leveraging like the tools us in HR have has really been an area of growth, fun, and energy here, like from Yao. So that's me.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for being here. And we have done a couple sessions now over
Yeah.
the past year. And, and what I like, this is very intentional, is you're going along a journey. Personally and with your organization, and it's a bit of a check-in on where you are, because you have been very eloquent in talking about this being an ongoing struggle, like seeing progression as a key metric of success. You've termed this as a battle, and putting those kind of militaristic terms around it in a very appropriate way, insofar as that we have to have courage, we have to be uncomfortable, we have to do things that we might not otherwise do if we're going to perpetuate the status quo, which for many has been grossly unfair.
Mhm.
So, today's theme is going to be, again, a takeoff of our previous discussions, but it's going to be worthwhile, regardless of if you know the content of our past conversations, in that you are driving actual D&I initiatives, and being on the receiving end, as is put in the title. How are people receiving it? Are they sticking with it? Is there receptivity there? Is there resistance? So that's really what I would like to explore with you today. So, with that framing, where are you right now organizationally and personally, and maybe even before that? What's going on there in DC, my friend?
Yeah, yeah,
are
yeah.
you
And nothing's
you
happening
staying
here.
safe? And, yeah,
And nothing's happening here recently. No. So,
yeah,
but yeah, I'll share like on a few things. I'll touch on like the DC thing, like just like a little bit, just because I want to make sure that we save some time here at like the end, like to really focus on it. But it is no mystery and no secret that the events of last week has really, it obviously shook like the nation, and it shook the world really. But for those who live here, right, for those who call this place home, right, it does feel like some intruders came to like your house, broke like some things, and then like they left, and now you're picking up like the pieces, if
yeah.
if like you will. So there is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of questioning, healing that's trying to happen. But we are still picking up like the pieces, just like, if glass broke, at your house through like a window, well, yeah, like it takes some time to clean up like the shards and things like that. So I feel like that's the state where we are, just here in DC. But, we can talk about that more here like in a second. And I think overall, just, for the topic that we're sharing on today, just trying to really see the two sides between, hey, I'm fortunate enough to be on to have been on both ends of like the spectrum of being somebody who's implementing or DE&I initiatives, but also somebody who has been a recipient of those as well with those in my social circles too. So I think there are some key elements there, Al, of how do things we think that we're doing really translate to the people we think that like we're helping, right? So I think that's a few of the ideas here that we have lined up to talk about.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna get I'm gonna get close to the fire on this question.
Let's do
So
it, yes.
hopefully it'll be valuable to everybody, because it's on everybody's mind, and we've all had conversations of this nature. Is that there are 75 million people who voted for the current president, and they work next to us if we're in the physical environment, and they work virtually now. Conversely, if you're one of those individuals, you're saying, well, there's these progressive libs who are working next to me as well. So we have these and people don't know who they vote. They might have an inclination of where they lean, but there is some fear that, hey, I don't want to show my cards, because then I'm going to be put in that box. No. And by its very nature, DEI and belonging, correct me if I'm wrong in your experience, attract a progressive lot, people of diverse backgrounds who want to change things. Yes. Whereas we have a bunch of people who are pretty cool with the status quo because they have benefited disproportionately, either consciously or unconsciously. So as we move forward, and I'm hesitant to use the word heal, particularly how it's been used over the past week, but as we try and get better at appreciating different people of different backgrounds, different ways of being, different religious affiliations, all the ways that we are uniquely awesome as individuals, as we try and look at what is unique and different that we can celebrate in others versus, oh, they're not like me, and criticize and shun away. How do we, from your perspective, get to a better place within organizations, as opposed to just having a beer with somebody at a bar, assuming that's safe at some point in the future? Right. How can we in this time, still have meaningful discussions and start moving towards the same North Star? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to me, right, is those moments and opportunities. So those opportunities that we see beyond what's on the exterior, right? And I think that children helped to portray this the best. There was a viral clip a few months ago, like I was going like around, and it was a clip of there were two young boys, couldn't have been older than 4 years old, and I think it had been a really, really long time since they have seen each other. And but as soon as they saw each other, like walking down like the street, they were walking arms open, both wide, running to each other to give each other a hug, just because they haven't seen each other a long time, right? One was black, one was white, by the way, right? So now, why was that a clip like that employed? One, obviously, it was important from the, let's call it like the racial aspect of, okay, well, these are two people who have no idea of the of the background, like the baggage that just comes with just being inside of your own skin, right? But two, we can all connect with missing a long lost friend, somebody you haven't seen in a long time. That is not a Black thing. That's not a white thing. That is a human thing, right? Yep. So going to that, right, to your question, I think the question that answers that question are, what are ways that we can put forth the more human aspects that really connects with everyone, right? And this is why, you're seeing a belonging being such a, a bigger aspect of the whole diversity and inclusion strategy, because I think we're seeing that helping people find their place of belonging is at its core an element of human nature that we're all trying to find, that we're all trying to move towards, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were like to ask, Vic today, hey, where do you think, that we can start to explore like some of those things within our organizations? One, I think that we're doing like the right thing and trying to celebrate our diversity. But two, at times there is a tendency to keep those kinds of group insular, right? So it really becomes, right, kind of the thing that we're hoping it doesn't like become, where this is a group where all the Latinx people go. This is like a group where all of the, perhaps the Asian, like Pacific Islanders go, the African Black like community goes, right? Where what we really want like to do is have those groups. And I talked about this like before, but find ways to share the more human aspects with the entire organization so that people can connect. Not just people find like people, but people connect with the human emotions, experiences that we all have. Your first day at work, right? What was that like? That's a thing that we all fear, that all feel, that anxiety. So yeah, those are the things that that keep me hopeful. I like about it, and I think the more we can channel to that, like the more we'll be able to at least begin to see some measure of progress, however we choose to measure that.
Yeah, I really celebrate what you're saying, and I want to go down a level with you on this. In that, many companies have diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging programs. It's educational. They might have a newsletter. They might have a council. There might be a diversity group or whatever you term it. And sometimes, to your point, a select group joins, they read it, and they want to get involved. But we're really talking about creating a cultural change, and that requires everybody to get on board. And that means that there is a need for everyone to exert energy and create an experience for themselves to understand their biases, understand how they show up, how they can empathize better, create psychological and emotional safety in addition to physical safety. So my point of question to you from a program perspective, what have you done that you sense that's resonating, or what do you hope to do in the future, or what do you see elsewhere that, hey, gosh, it would be really great if more organizations did X? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so a few things, as always, come like to mind here. So something that we're trying to do, but also seeing a lot of organizations do is, one, start to be transparent about their diversity data with their employees, right? And that, share, hey, this is what we look like now, all right? And have people draw their own, conclusions. And then that brings people to the actual conversation. We talked, I think one time about comparing the talent pool that's like available for, to do the kind of work like that you do inside your organization, and comparing that to the people that are actually there. And, if some large discrepancies, don't say nothing. Just post it up. Let people, engage with that data, and then have a forum to talk about that, right? So that's, one aspect. Another, from a programmatic standpoint, is, now that you're sharing the data, really trying to, how would I say it, invite people to understand why these efforts are good for them, right? If I'm a white man, right, and you tell me, hey, we're having the diversity inclusion program that will completely, help this population. I'm not inside that population, right? I don't have a way to connect to that. There is less of an attachment for me. I know it's good, but how does that help overall, right? Perhaps it's, sharing that more diverse companies have seen greater innovation, or there is a direct linkage to the diversity and, a profit growth. So, sharing that this is a strategy that can help overall, and this is how it connects to you. Because I think that's, to your point, there's a portion that's missing to try to bring those people who may not be a target of the programs and initiatives that we're doing to really find ways to really connect them to it, like, as well. And that's, something that I think as HR like professionals, and even as an industry, that we need to, be mindful of, that if we want to, move this ahead, it takes all of us. So we need to find a way to bring in all of us as well. So those are, two things that come to mind when I'm thinking, how can we really bring people in? And just, one more thing from a program perspective is, like, a lot of times, there are these cookie cutter programs, that, says this is how you should do a DE&I a program, or these are like the ways. And that, depending on the maturity of the organization, may be a good place to start. But it really does have to be employee driven, right? And driven. And, there's no one way to build a right program. But the right program is the right program that works for your folks there. Right. So those are thoughts there that come to mind in regard to
it's just picking up on the last point, because many organizations have, okay, here's our diversity initiative. Here's this video that everyone's going to watch. It's, compliance training. You check that box. I don't want to diminish them, but obviously, you cannot stare at a screen and answer some questions and all of a sudden be a changed individual. If that happens, show me that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned forums, and one of the things that I've talked about, and I shared this previously. Last week, I had a great conversation with an executive of a Bay Area tech company, and he and I were discussing the potential polarization between being an activist, activism, and being a professional. Because coming in there and just being a bull in a china shop is not appropriate when you have a mission in the organization to get work done and function as a team and all that. At the same time, you can't leave your humanity at the door. So a video is not going to solve that problem. You mentioned, again, forums. So do organizations have the responsibility to create such forums? And if so, at what frequency do they happen? What do they actually look like ideally? Are they like this, where we have, 40, 50, 100 people on a call and there's, some dialogue and Q&A? Is it a smaller pod with 4 or 5 people of diverse backgrounds opening up? I mean, and obviously, given remote work and where we are with the pandemic, I mean, what are your thoughts there around the use of forums to augment, and is it the responsibility of companies to do that?
Right. So I'll answer like the second part first on the responsibility, and give examples of kind of our frequencies at our place. Like, the thought comes like to me of, if this is your workspace, and if you don't create space for certain conversations to happen, you're really relying on chance that it's just going to organically happen, right?
Yeah.
Almost like, we've all heard the story. I'm not sure if it's true or not anymore, of, like the situation where, like, there was a fire and across like the street or something like that. And everyone else thought that someone else would call like the fire department, but no one did. Right. Yeah. So, you can't just assume that things would just happen organically. You have to create like the space, that intentional space, that this is what we're going to set aside. This is a platform. This is a forum this is the space where, we talk about these things now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we have just, on to help people like understand, examples of frequency. Again, your place will help like determine this, but we have kind of our big four employee like resource groups where they're called a Unity, which is more of our diversity and inclusion kind of program. There's a Women in Tech, veterans, and then a next generation, right? So those people who are newer in the workforce. And what we're trying like to do now, especially since more people are like remote, is probably like once a quarter, right? Say that, hey, we have an expectation that you're going to share something, and it's a bit more structured, but we're working now to see, okay, well, how can we give you a platform that everyone can come into, that the company's resources, like the leadership capital, is really like behind, to really bring people in, right? So not just, okay, well, we're having our Slack channels and our internal, the communities here, but we're now putting the onus on you, like community, to share, to help us understand, to help us see things that we may not see, right? And that's why having that space is important, because if that space is not there, if that forum is not there, then it feels almost like, out of touch, or like an injection came out of nowhere, right? All of a sudden, like the CEO was saying, hey, like we're going to, have, diversity forums next week. And you're like, how, why? It just feels out of place, but there's a constant space for that. All of a sudden, trying to elevate a platform is not so much of a misnomer. It feels like, okay, we have this. It's a part of what like we do. So that's an example, I think, of programming, but why having that forum and space is important. So it gets built into the culture.
Love it. And let me jump in if I may, because I, in my role, I see a lot of innovative technologies. I feel very blessed that I can see what innovators are thinking about and doing. One of the things that has come top of mind for me is, so if you have forums once a quarter, once a month, it's kind of like, okay, I go in there, good conversation, now I'm off, and I have my habits, right? And to shift habits, to shift mindsets, to shift ways of being requires practice. And, then it invites the question, well, what the heck does that mean? Is that a daily thing? Is it a consistent thing? So there's two things I just want to toss up, and these are very much ideas. So one, there's a company called Q Change, who has been involved in our programs, full disclosure, in the past, but I'm not selling them, but I'm just putting forth what I think is really, really interesting. I personally try and have 45-minute meetings, 50-minute meetings, so I can do some tasks after that were relevant to what I just did, and also prepare adequately for the next meeting, assuming I only have a 10, 15-minute break. And many go back to back, and now all of a sudden, a lot of things get dropped. So what QChange does is, before you go into a meeting, and it's in a Microsoft Teams-based app, they will have some prompting questions. Are you aware of your, who else is going to be in the meeting and their structure of interpretation? Are you going to stay as a listener? Are you going to be conscious of your breath? There's all kinds of practices that can be employed that can help an individual show up in a meeting more present and prepared to honor people's individuality, as opposed to just fire through the day. The other idea is related insofar as that, what it would be like to journal at the end of the day around your experience and how you felt you showed up to others, then rate it and track your progress over time. Both of those things take a little bit of effort, not a whole lot, but they do start to build habits and continuous awareness, as opposed to this event-driven awareness that a lot of diversity and D&I programs have. So just as a concept, what are your reactions to those ideas?
Sure. So, you're, kind of talking like my language, or preaching like to the choir here, like a little bit, because, like a lot of my work really centered around learning and development, right? And there's this a buzzword now inside of the L&D space of learning the flow of work, right? And for those who aren't familiar with that term, is let's not push people to where like the learning happens. Let's push learning to where the people are, right? I think that is a great example of how do we try to build in habits that people don't have naturally, yet build it into something that they're already doing, right? So I think that concept itself is really powerful. Now, some may like buy in, some may see it and ignore it, but it's the reminder, right? And not just like the reminder, but also the championing of a leadership of this is what we value. This is how like we're going about it. But this is also why it's important for you, right? So I think things like that, but also the messaging, right? Like around that to not just have it be something you're just told like to do, but something you're fully aware of, that this is why what I'm doing here really connects to either the overall strategy or my overall well-being as a person is tied like to this. I think that is where tools like that become really, really powerful, because you're not trying to drive people to like an event. You're meeting people in the flow of work that they're already doing. So that sounds, that's great.
I thank you for that. And one of the things that I've really been processing over the last few months, and it's rooted in one of the conversations that we've had recently, is, if we, DE&I implies, and this is my lens and I'll own this, is that, okay, I'm doing this for others. I'm doing this for somebody else. But the benefits come back to me as the individual. I have elevated self-awareness. I have elevated confidence. I have elevated empathy, which brings me peace and reduces my anxiety as I engage with people of different backgrounds. But it hasn't been sold that way in most organizations. So can you speak to that? Like, if you're receiving these programs, it's not only for the benefit of others,
yes,
but it's benefit for yourself as well. I mean, that's my view. I mean, what are your thoughts?
That's true. But I would say it's hard to sell it that way, right?
Yeah. I mean, but if I'm convinced that that's a truism, that's a truth, then my propensity to engage with it would theoretically be higher. And so it's a bit of a marketing positioning, if you will. But yes. I believe it, to be true in my own experience. I enjoy being an ally. I enjoy helping people feel comfortable. It gives me, satisfaction, and I'm sure, there's chemical things happening in my body that are contributing to that. But again, we have this other centered, viewpoint. If organization, if leaders specifically, those in charge of DEI programs, kind of took that tact. I mean, and again, I'm going to go a little bit further.
And I have a question like for you too, by the way, like
because we have like engagement programs, we have all this stuff to help people be more engaged, and I believe we need better alignment amongst these programs, because if I'm engaging in self-development and I'm creating a safer culture for everybody, then I'm going to benefit. My coworkers are going to benefit. The organization is going to benefit. All those good things that you talked about are going to ensue to a high degree of confidence. So, what's your feeling about how DEI programs have been positioned, and what can we do to improve them?
Yeah, I think that's I guess prior to like a lot of what's been happening like recently. Unfortunate to say that a lot of DEI programs have been a black box. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? It's been a checkbox. It's a nice like to have. It's cool like to show on, like your website or the board slides, right? But it hasn't, I think, been a core strategy or core driver of success. And a meaningful way as a few other things are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think with just a lot of the recent events like that are happening that have happened, George Floyd, Black Lives like Matter, even like some of the like events here that have happened at like the Capitol in the past like week or so. There's been an increased spotlight to say it's not just enough to build a profit making like machine that just builds a capital. How are we improving the lives of the people that are here, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a question, but what's driving that question, right? What's driving that question is that more and more, the talent that's coming into like the workforce is more like aware of this and wants to work with organizations that put this at the forefront. So for a lot of, organizations, especially those like that are service driven, but any kind of business, unless you just hire all robots, have to have people, right? So and if you want like the best people, then you have to attract like the best people. And if the best people are attracted and are looking for organizations with these values, now all of a sudden it is a business continuity challenge. Or if you want to maintain the top positioning or the space that like you're in, you have to find ways to not only project that, but be that once people come in, because people can smell like the funk real quickly if they come in and what's being presented is not matching to what's internal, and then like they leave, and then now you're just left with bad like reviews on Glassdoor, right? So, that's what you don't want. But I think that's why like I think that those kinds of things are shifting now. But I don't think it's a secret that the positioning D&I for a long time has been like a checkbox, and for some places it still is. But I think for those forward-thinking organizations, they get it. That it can't just be like a checkbox, that there are some benefits inside of innovation, but that this is what people are looking for in a more inclusive workforce. And I think that, with COVID and having a remote workforce, it's even more important because people want that sense of like belonging, that sense of inclusion. How do you build that despite being in a distributed workforce? So that's a great question, Al. Like I think.
Well, thank you. I think that's a wonderful answer. And I got one more question. So if you're participating here, if you have questions, go to the Q&A tab and offer it up. I'm monitoring the feed, and I can relay that on to Vic. My question is that many organizations, and I'm going to be a bit cynical for a second, but there's a fine line between cynicism and realism. And granted, it's dynamic, it's organization to organization. It's like, okay, I've seen boards and I've seen executives say, we got to do this. And we got to do it because it's, we got to, given the social climate, we just got to do it. And as long as there's something that they can point to, they've kind of felt they've checked that box, they're dodging, the bullet, so to speak. They're just like, then there's others who're like, hey, I'm all in. This is a cultural priority. This is who we are. We need to let the world know. Prospective employees, current employees, alumni, we want them to be proud of how we're addressing Black Lives Matter, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, all these good stuff. So there's everybody in between. And so many of the listeners here and participants here today are probably in the middle of an organization. They're not at the C-level and they're not, junior, but at the same time, they're probably either involved in DE&I initiatives or they're a stakeholder of those initiatives. Probably the broadest, simplest way to put it. So where I'm landing with all this is, what roles do those within DEI have to sell upwards and outwards? And if I am not in DEI, how can I contribute and help the organization get to a better place? Am I just going to be sitting out here as a HR business partner or people manager, people leader, like just waiting for something to happen? Or what can I do to really prod and bring about or get leaders' attention and say, no, this is something that we got to shift and commit to an even higher degree? What would your advice be to those two personas, the DI folks and the stakeholders?
Sure. So to the D&I folks, I think one thing that comes to mind is that, and I think it goes across the board in HR for a long time, we haven't been as good as really tying HR activities to HR outcomes to business outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. So that kind of flow there. So the question is, what I want to challenge, our D&I brethren to do is finding better ways to match the activities that you're doing to core outcomes that drives business metrics, right? So the latter part there, HR outcomes that drives business metrics, that's one part of it. So, but let's say, right, that part has been done a bit colloquially where, hey, we've seen that a engagement increase of 1% translates to a business savings of $2 million. Great. How can you match now your HR activities to engagement, right? Because that is where now you can say, hey, when we are doing these D&I activities, it is improving our overall engagement when you look at those people who are a part of it versus those who aren't, right? And those people who may go through our programs and things like that versus people who don't. There's a clear distinction there. And what does that do for the business outcome, right? I think that we, with people analytics and just, HR just kind of going through this transformation that it's going through, infusing analytics in different places. This is where, you make those connections so that it's no longer just a nice thing to do. It is this is one of the, so as I work with a lot of senior executives, they're looking for where they need to push the button more to drive results. They're looking for us to tell them, okay, I know when we do this, it impacts this. So this is the outcome. And if you can provide even a modicum of clarity around that, you are really helping them make the choice a no-brainer because they now have a clear thing that they can now do with either their authority or the resources to drive that metric, right? So that's the first part of that.
Yeah, I celebrate what you're saying, certainly, because there's an assumption, and I've seen many HR leaders become vulnerable on this point. It's hey, you all are the experts. Tell me how these dots fit together. There's an assumption that whether it be a senior executive within HR or outside of HR, that they understand how the dots actually connect and to what degree. And if we can articulate those connections better of how even a training program and how people being more inclusive and creating the sense of belonging will drive innovation in turn, product development, customer satisfaction, all those, beneficial downstream outcomes. There's an assumption that narrative is in play, number one, and commonly understood. And oftentimes it's not. I mean, this is what we do. If you're listening and participating, is probably what you do. It's your core. But to assume that everybody understands that innately is erroneous. Would you agree with that? And the more specific question is how to communicate effectively those relationships without shaming somebody or showing up as some pretentious know-it-all.
No, yeah, sure. I think, to me, it's you bring people on the journey to the answer, right? So, when you're trying to get to the root cause of something, there are certain questions you ask yourself, you share with people that this is my journey to get to like this answer. So, if it's that presentation or maybe it's small, quicker, check-ins like here and there, the first question, hey, I'm trying like to figure out like the impacts of our, D&I efforts. Okay. So this is what I'm going like to look at. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm trying like to figure out how D&I impacts engagement, because like we know engagement impacts our cost savings, like for that. Hey, like I found out this, this is the relationship like between like those two, and I'm trying to calculate that, right? So bringing people along with you on your like discovery, and that's kind of the agile HR method there, where you're sharing, like the value faster, sooner, often. It's really one, how you get like buy-in, but then two, how you bring people like along to help to help them see it as well. You've already done all of like the work. So if you just bring like the answer, great, sure. Like some people like are fine with that, some people aren't. But if you truly want them like to know, bring them along with the questioning journey that you've gone through like yourself, so that they can be like a part of that and come to that same conclusion, or maybe like some different ones, and have like some different like ideas on that matter as well.
Yeah. I mean, Vic, as we start to wrap up here, I mean, I certainly am honored that you've taken the time again to share your thoughts and ideas, particularly given what's happening in DC, and particularly given that, we've seen your journey progress, over time, and this notion that, DEI programs are being received by people and being very conscious of how, the participants are engaging or not. And also, how we in TEI can be more, not only proactive, but we can be, for lack of a better, I'm trying to refrain from using the word selling, but I'll just embrace it. Selling our programs so they're adopted. They're less, okay, gosh, I should, I gotta, comply, check that box, but really inviting so people engage ongoing. So it's an important discussion. It's obviously not over. As we start to wrap here, any closing comments for our listeners?
Yeah. So again, I am in the DC area, and it is a troubling time. Here. People don't realize this, but the Capitol building is one of the let's call it the three sacred buildings of power here inside of like the U.S. Right? You have like the White House, right? People don't. That they would just storm like the White House and things like would be fine, right? The Congress is the equal check of the White House, and that's kind of where people sit. So, the recent events has shown us, I think, how much D&I is important, right? Even from a personal standpoint, and from an organizational standpoint, but also from a societal standpoint, right? Where there is a lot of work that needs to be done to truly help understand like one another and bring people to the table, right? Because some people can say, okay, well, these people felt disenfranchised, and that's why like they're doing it. Sure, there's been disenfranchises since the beginning of time. Trust me, right? Right. But how can we help to again bring that together and bring people to like the table? So sure, like we may not always like agree, but we know how to work together, right? And finding ways to work together is, to me, the hallmark of a growing society where there's tons of ideas, but people know how like to work like together. So that's what I leave folks with. That's what I'm hopeful for, and that's what I'm excited for here, Al.
I'm excited too, and I'll just echo, organizations do have a role to play in bringing positive societal change to not only U.S. society, but, around the world, because there are countries who have embraced the role of commercial organizations in that journey more than we have in the U.S. And I think we're awakening to that reality. So, as always, Vic, thank you for being you, doing what you do, and look forward to catching up before too long. In the meantime, please stay safe and have a great 2021. All right.
All right, Al. See you now.
All right. Be well. Bye-bye.